Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Tuesday, August 23rd. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Notre Dame game is in 11 days, the game against Michigan in 95 days. On yesterday's show, Tony Gerderman went through 6 reasons why Ohio State fans should be excited for the season. Then on Monday morning, we got a chance to talk to new defensive coordinator Jim Knowles. And boy, he sure sounded optimistic about the season as well. This is a time of year when college football coaches generally don't want to jinx anything or get anyone overconfident by talking too positively about things. But Monday, Jim Knowles said that now that they were getting guys back from injury, quote, "I don't have that many concerns now that the corners are coming back. I'm confident in what we have." Kevin Noon of Buckeye Huddle was there covering that press conference along with me. And Kevin, when Jim Knowles said that, I thought, I know the first thing we're going to be talking about on the morning show because, boy, Kevin, if that is true, that seems like very, very good news for the Buckeyes.
Yeah, I touched upon it briefly on the Big Me kickoff, which I ran on Monday late afternoon, but I knew we would talk about it at length here, and I wanted to leave the shows a little bit different there. But, you know, when there are times that you're in these press conferences and it's just, kind of drones on, but when he said that and it perked up, I was like, all right, we're on to something here at this point. So, yeah, it's very easy to just sit there and be like, well, we're just trying to muddle on and get there or whatnot. But Jim Knowles, and we haven't been around Jim Knowles for years, so we don't necessarily know what his delivery is. But these coaches aren't going to come right out and be like, everything's hunky-dory. But, with him talking about getting the corners back and everything else, and, they feel, Ryan Day had mentioned that he feels very comfortable about where this team is going to be in terms of health. It was all very good news if you're a supporter of the Scarlet and Gray, and your biggest concern is, where is this defense going to stand? Now, it's going to be put up or shut up time here in, what did you say, 11 days? It'll be put up or shut up time at that point, but, as they did their last AM practice to lead into where they're going to start moving to PM practices, you have to feel pretty good just based on what you're getting. And I've talked to people who've covered Jim Knowles at other various stops, and they've said he really isn't a BSer. He isn't somebody who just answers to give you, just some answer to go off on. So, feel good, Buckeyes fans. I think that is that was a very meaningful statement.
Yeah, you never know with coaches the first year in. Are you always just going to get, are you going to get the sort of sunshine pumpers, or are you going to get the people who are kind of going to shoot you straight? Jeff Hafley was great with shooting us straight because there would be times he wouldn't want to answer a question, and instead of kind of tap dancing around it, he'd just say, I don't think I'm going to answer that question. I'm not going to answer that question. And he would just kind of give you a separate answer and just sort of acknowledge, like, yeah, I'm not going to tell you what you want to know, but I'll give you something else. It feels like, if Knowles is as much of a straight shooter as it sounds like he might be, and as we're sort of getting the sense that he might be, he's kind of a no-nonsense guy. And the question was, what's your biggest concern right now on the defense? And boy, if the biggest concern on the defense is, I don't really have a concern, and that's the side of the ball that Ohio State fans are concerned about, like, oh boy, this could be a pretty interesting fall in Columbus. More good news on the defensive front came in terms of how much of the defense he has installed. He talked a little bit ago about, having 25% of the defense installed. And I was like, oh boy, is that good? Is that bad? What does that actually mean? He estimated on Monday, he's got 75% of it in now. And, that doesn't seem like enough necessarily just a week and a half away from the season opener. It might not sound that way anyway. He sounded like they were actually ahead of where he expected to be.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the biggest things, and I don't want to jump ahead on us, but when he sat there and he told us that they don't want to sit there and spring things on guys during like a game week. So it sounds like they're going to give them all the tools right now. They probably have already or are in the process of knowing what's going to happen when they have to run a more traditional 4-3 against Wisconsin or somebody like that. But that, back in the day, you could sit there and spring that on the guys, but that's not what you're doing now at this point. And, that you don't really necessarily get to 100%. So sometimes you may hold some things back at that point. We don't want anybody to know what we have. Well, if you're not going to spring that on a game week and you still have some things left back, could that be something that you work on during whatever it is, your 15 bowl practices or something like that? So there was a lot of things that you could go off with your imagination on, but the fact that they went from 25% to 75% is pretty solid. I mean, it sounds like they should be able to get to whatever upper echelon that they want to get to at that point, and then really be able to start to dial in on Notre Dame when you do true Notre Dame install, which, could start by the end of this week, but certainly next week with that game being whatever it is, 11 days away.
Yeah, the install for Notre Dame sounded like it was going to start probably end of this week, but then next week is game week. You are just days to we shift our media availability schedule and everything else next week to the normal fall schedule. This is the last week of camp, and then it sort of shifts into game week mode. So, he has talked about the overall not a lot of concerns and sort of on track with where they are in terms of install of the new defense. He also was asked about, he had a really good defense at Oklahoma State last year and did it with a defense with, I think, 1 4 or 5-star player on the whole defense. This year, he's got something like 35 or 44 and 5 stars on the defensive side of the ball. And boy, it is, you look at the personnel differences. He was asked about that and, how that's different, the guys he's working with, the personnel he's working with this year as compared to what he's had in the past at some of these other stops at Duke and Oklahoma State and places like that. And he said, there's a type of player that I think most coaches view as something of a luxury or even like a unicorn, the linebacker safety hybrid. And that's something that Knowles said, it lets you do a lot of stuff when you have that kind of guy. And it seems like he thinks he's got one this season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you brought up a good point in terms of what it is that, he certainly did not have the Jimmies and Joes that he has now when he was at Oklahoma State or of any of the other stops that he's been at. And there are certain body types that you may not be able to get at certain places. In Ohio State, it was one of the most elite recruiting programs in the nation. And, he certainly went on and on about a lot of guys. He went on and on about Lathan Ransom, who has been a two-time silver bullet of the day situation. He didn't necessarily plan on having any two-time guys. He went on and on about Ronnie Hickman. I mean, there were a lot of things that he was able to point out. It really doesn't sound to me that, that he sees a lot of guys that are not, carrying the water at this point.
Yeah, and in terms of that linebacker safety hybrid, he talked about, it's very easy to find a linebacker defensive end hybrid. You can find those kind of anywhere. Having a Court Williams on the roster, and he didn't talk about Sonny Styles, but maybe that's something that Sonny Styles grows into. Having that role, boy, it can really, it helps you disguise what you're doing. Do they have 3 linebackers on the field, or do they have 3 safeties on the field? If you've got Court Williams, it's like the answer can be yes to both of those at the same time, which is, can be a very confusing thing, can help kind of disguise what you're trying to do on defense. So yeah, that was an interesting thing. One other interesting note from Jim Knowles, and this is something that I had seen this on his resume, and I just had not thought about it. We talk to these guys all the time about going against the other side. What does, we ask, you can oftentimes learn a lot about the offense by asking the defensive guys who have to go against them in practice. And we've heard a lot from the offense about how the challenge of going against Jim Knowles' defense and how well they disguise stuff and how much stuff they throw at you and all that kind of stuff. Knowles was a linebackers coach at Ole Miss in 2003, which, if you want to do the math in your head, the quarterback at Ole Miss that year was a gentleman named Eli Manning. And so Jim Knowles went up against Eli Manning in practice every day as a linebackers coach. And he was asked about how CJ Stroud measures up, again, in terms of executing against the difficult and unpredictable defenses that are getting thrown at him compared to Eli Manning. It sounds like he compared pretty favorably to Eli.
Yeah, I mean, God, if Ohio State can have the same type of success there that Ole Miss had with Eli Manning and what he was able to do in terms of, with you and me not necessarily I don't like the Giants, but with him winning the Super Bowl and everything else, I mean, it makes it very real at that point. And a lot of times you get the coach speak of, oh yeah, we're going against the other side. They're really good. They have guys too, blah, blah, blah. I'm focused on what it is that I'm trying to do. But, he was very free with the compliments of what CJ Stroud is, just, calling him, that he's just, like a superior player. And, it just bodes so well. And somebody who has been around the block a few times, like Jim Knowles. I mean, he knows what he's talking about. He's somebody who he doesn't sleep well before games and everything else. He's a guy who gets lost in his own head. So for him to say those things about CJ, I mean, certainly once again another check mark in the good column.
Yeah, and he did say he didn't say CJ Stroud was better than Eli Manning. I don't think you want to put that on a college player right now, but he did kind of say, yeah, I mean, defenses have gotten a lot more complicated since 2003. They're throwing a lot more at those quarterbacks than they were in 2003, so you can kind of read between the lines there if you want to. Another guy who is a big fan of CJ Stroud, Ryan Day, we got to talk to him as well on Monday. He talked about having the luxury of having a second-year starter and a third-year player at quarterback, which you think back, and it's like, oh yeah, he really kind of hasn't had the last time he had a third-year player was Dwayne Haskins, and he was not a second-year starter. So Ryan Day has really never had that since JT Barrett back in 2017 in Day's first season in Columbus. So having CJ Stroud, that's obviously a big benefit to Ryan Day. But he was also very high on what Kyle McCord has shown in camp. And Kevin, you just wrote a story about Kyle, but what's the latest with Kyle McCord's development this fall?
Yeah, I mean, he said during the chance that we had to talk to quarterbacks that, he came in, and Ohio State at that point had Jack Miller, who's moved on to Florida, and CJ Stroud, and he knew he had to catch up quickly. Ryan Day talked about the fact that, you have to be ready as he didn't come right out and say that he's the number 2. I mean, you don't want to lose Devin Brown at that point. I mean, I think we know how the pecking order is going to work, but he's got to be ready to come in. But I mean, as soon as the second play of the game, potentially, you just don't know what's going to happen at that point. That Kyle has certainly shown the maturity, and he's certainly moving along. Remember, he did start a game last year against Akron when they held CJ Stroud out for a shoulder injury. But it certainly seems that Kyle is getting very close. I don't remember if you'd said it or we talked about it prior to the show. Came really close to grading out as a champion in the scrimmage. All good things, as Ohio State is going to have to face a reality after this season of no more CJ Stroud as he goes off to the league, and it's going to be either McCord, or it's going to be Devin Brown, or potentially the quarterback commit Brock Glenn. But I would say that the inside track right now is probably with McCord.
As you said, one snap away, you could if CJ Stroud goes down on the first play against Notre Dame, you've got to be ready to go. And, Day talked about that in terms of having that mindset and not having but really I'm not going to play till next year because CJ's here. You've got to be prepared, ready to go, as if you could go in on the second play of the game. I mean, think back to the national championship game against Alabama a couple of years ago. Trey Sermon breaks his collarbone on the second carry of the game or whatever it is, and all of a sudden, ta-da, the backup running back is now the starting running back. So that is it is a thing that can happen, and obviously Ohio State's offensive line is going to do its very best to make sure it does not happen to CJ Stroud this year, but Kyle McCord sort of waiting in the wings. If you lose the one 5-star quarterback, you got another 5-star quarterback behind him, and then there's another 5-star quarterback behind him. So there's a little more depth there in the Ohio State quarterback room than probably most programs have at the moment. Another spot where they have some pretty good quality depth is at running back, and they just lost Evan Pryor for the year. Dallin Hayden, Ryan Day said, very, no question about it. Dallin Hayden is the third running back. That was something that Alex Gleitman had put in his ADEC column last week, and I think we talked about on the show at one point. But, he just lost his black stripe. But then behind Trey Van Henderson, behind Mayan Williams, behind Dallin Hayden, they have a little insurance on the roster as well. They only have 3 scholarship running backs, but they kind of have 4 in a way. What did Ryan Day have to say about that?
Yeah, remember that Chip Trayanum from Arizona State was a running back. He was recruited at ASU as a running back. He's played his career, the years that he was at ASU, as a running back. He's probably Ohio State's number 3 linebacker, but if Ohio State gets in a pinch, they have Chip Trayanum, who did take a couple of reps at running back in a practice. So, that's nice to know. I mean, you don't want to sit there and see them being like, well, we now feel that we need to either play Chip or Steel Chambers. I mean, if you're taking, two of your top three linebackers and having to move them to offense, I guess we certainly have seen guys play on both sides of the ball before, but it's been a minute. And just the physical rigors of playing running back and all the hits that you take. But I mean, it's certainly something that's there. You certainly believe with Trevion Henderson and Mayan Williams and with Dallin Hayden now emerging as the number 3, that this is an insurance policy for sure. But the fact that they were forthcoming about that, was something that, I found interesting, because it would have been very easy to bury. We could have all speculated about it. If they don't say anything, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's around, does it make a noise? If Chip Trainum has 15 reps at running back in a practice that there's, a closed practice, did it actually happen? Well, apparently, yes.
It did, and yeah, it does not sound like you should necessarily draft Chip Trainum in your fantasy college football league as a running back. Probably, he's more of a break glass in case of emergency guy, but, it's always good to have a fire extinguisher around. And, if you have to break glass in case of emergency and break out the fire extinguisher to play running back, well, you can do that. That is a nice luxury to have. Sounds like Ohio State going to have, the coaching staff feels like they've got a couple nice luxuries to have. We just talked about Court Williams in that kind of context as well. So, yeah, you come away from these conversations with coaches and it's like, I think they think they're going to be pretty good this year. And I think Ohio State fans are kind of feeling that way as well. And if you are feeling that way and looking to read more and get more excited about the season, a great place to do that would be at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That's where Kevin and I work. Tony Gerderman works there too. We cover the team together. But Mark Givler, Alex Gleitman, they cover the recruiting for us. We have Ross Fulton. We have Justin Whitlatch. We have Devin as well. He does, Devin Radcliffe does, they do X's and O's. We got 3 X's and O's guys, 2 recruiting guys, 3 team coverage guys. We've got the whole deal covered. It is a fantastic team. It is a fantastic site. It is a great community, a rapidly growing community. We have had a fantastic first week of after the launch, and are looking forward to much, much more excitement there. So make sure you sign up today at BuckeyeHuddle.com. A really fun community, great content, lots of insight, lots of analysis, and all of a team that should have a pretty interesting season. So guessing there should be some interest about that as well. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.